I never thought one night could completely turn my life upside down. But that night when my husband forced me to do that with his friend, everything changed. It turned into the wildest, most unforgettable night of my life. It all began on what felt like just another ordinary night, with a casual conversation between my husband, Michael, and me. The crackling fire in our living room was usually a sound of comfort, but tonight it felt like a restless whisper, mirroring the unease that had settled between Michael and me. We've been married for 15 years, a solid block of time filled with shared memories, laughter, the usual ebb and flow of daily life. Michael, my dependable husband, sat opposite me on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames, as though he were searching for something lost in their depths. I knew something was off even before he began to speak, but I wasn't prepared for the words that would soon leave his mouth. He cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the comfortable silence, and said, "Lisa, there's something I've been wanting to talk about." I instinctively tensed, preparing myself for the usual conversation topics. Bill's work, the monotony of our everyday life. But those usual themes were nowhere near what was about to happen. The thought that maybe he'd finally decided to book that long, overdue vacation to Italy flickered through my mind, before I quickly dismissed it as wishful thinking. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral while trying to act calm. His gaze shifted to mine. There was an intensity there that unsettled me. "I want you to be with another man," Michael said, his voice calm, almost too casual, as if he was suggesting what we should have for dinner. And the words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what I had just heard. And everything changed in that moment. The usual cozy atmosphere of our evening suddenly replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the joke, the smirk, the "just kidding." None came, and the silence was deafening. The look in his eyes was serious, a strange mix of detached curiosity and something else that I couldn't quite decipher, something that made me feel unsafe. And as he looked at me, I noticed for the first time how different he was. What I finally managed to whisper, my voice cracking. "What did you just say?" Michael's expression remained maddeningly calm, as though he hadn't just detonated our entire world. "I've been thinking about it," he said, leaning back. "It could be good for us, for you." For a moment I couldn't speak. This wasn't the Michael I knew. My Michael, steady, practical, grounded, would never suggest something so bizarre. The room silence stretched taut between us, as my mind scrambled to make sense of his words. "Are you out of your mind?" I said finally. My voice was sharper than I intended. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel a flush creeping up my neck. "Where is this coming from?" Michael tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "I've been thinking about it for a while," he admitted. "I think it could open things up for us. Make things better." Better. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. This man sitting across from me looked like my husband. But everything about him, his words, his tone, even the way he smiled, felt alien, twisted. "This isn't normal," I said, standing abruptly. The sudden movement made me dizzy, but I needed the space. "Couples don't do this. You don't just suggest something like this." "What the hell, Michael?" He shrugged, as though I'd asked him why he'd forgotten to take out the trash. "Some do, and it works for them." His voice was infuriatingly calm, tinged with something that felt like amusement. "I'm not saying we have to decide right now. Just think about it. Think about it." The audacity of the request made my hands tremble. I clenched them into fists, trying to ground myself. "Why would you even want this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. What's wrong with us, with me? Michael's gaze softened, and for a moment he almost looked like the man I'd fallen in love with. It's not about something being wrong, he said gently. I just think it could be different. And maybe something different is what we need. The words settled like stones in my chest. I turned away, my back to him, trying to process the enormity of what he'd said. Different, better. His justifications looped in my mind, growing more absurd with each repetition. This is insane, I said finally. My voice flat. You can't honestly think I'd agree to this? Why not, he countered, his tone still infuriatingly measured. Don't you trust me? I spun to face him, anger flaring hot and bright. This isn't about trust, Michael. This is about you asking me to destroy everything we built. Everything we are. He stood then, closing the distance between us with measured steps. I backed away instinctively, but the couch behind me stopped my retreat. He reached for my hand, his touch light, almost tender. I'm not trying to destroy anything, Lisa. I'm trying to make us stronger by asking me to sleep with someone else. I pulled my hand from his, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? Michael didn't flinch, if anything. His expression hardened, resolve taking root. His name's Daniel, he said quietly. You've met him, he's interested. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. You've already picked someone. My voice was barely a whisper, a mix of shock, disgust, and a strange, forbidden excitement that I couldn't understand. But it was there. He turned towards me, his eyes meeting mine. The look was so calm, as if everything was normal. And it was so out of place. He's a nice guy, he said. Daniel. You've seen him at my work. He also said that he saw you at the gym. I think you would like him too. You know, he's nice to me. I think he would be good for you, he added. Then he walked towards me. He's experienced, and I really think that if we just embrace it, things would become a lot better for you. His words felt like a twisted and distorted form of affection, as if he genuinely believed that this could somehow be beneficial for me, as if he was doing it for my own good. That was truly horrifying. And I wanted to understand, so I did not run yet. You've talked to him, I whispered. Michael nodded, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. He's coming to dinner tomorrow just to talk. You invited him. The words came out in a near scream without even telling me. I wanted to gauge your reaction first, he said, and now I know. I stared at him, my breath coming in shallow bursts. My Michael was gone, replaced by this stranger wearing his face. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But all I could do was stand there, frozen as the firelight flickered between us. Tomorrow, Daniel was coming tomorrow, and my world as I knew it was already gone. What happened next was something I could never have imagined. The next day stretched endlessly, each minute laid in with an invisible weight. I moved through the motions of my routine, wiping counters, chopping vegetables. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. The image of Daniel lingered, uninvited and vivid. I hadn't given him much thought before, but now he loomed large in my imagination. I recalled the first time I saw him at the gym. His broad shoulders and the effortless way he carried himself, as though the space bent slightly to accommodate him. His laughter had been deep, cutting through the hum of machines. I hadn't thought anything of it then, but now the memory felt charged, like I had overlooked something I shouldn't have. And then there was the way his gaze had lingered on me. Not leering, but deliberate, as though he was seeing past the surface. The knife slipped on the cutting board, jolting me back to the present. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. It wasn't like me to get lost in my thoughts, let alone thoughts like these. But Michael's words had opened a door I wasn't prepared to walk through. And now I couldn't seem to shut it. By the time I set the table, my stomach twisted with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The house felt too quiet. The spaces between sounds stretching unnaturally long. I glanced at the clock, each tick pulling me closer to a moment I couldn't fully understand, let alone predict. I didn't know what I was waiting for, only that it was already in motion. And as much as I tried to resist the pull, a part of me, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, felt drawn to see where it would lead. Then the doorbell rang. The sound ripping through the suffocating silence of the house, and my heart leaped into my throat. My hands went cold. All the blood that I had went to my face. As the realization washed over me, this was it. I was no longer myself, I was now a puppet. I heard Michael approaching the door, his footsteps light and quick. I could tell by the excitement in his pace that he was expecting this, that he wanted it, and the thought made my stomach churn. I hated him for it. I saw him opening the door. Then I saw Daniel's tall figure. And for a moment my body just froze. He was here. I walked to the living room, and there they were, their laughter echoing in the space. A sharp reminder of how out of place I was feeling. They turned to me, their smiles almost predatory. Their eyes lingering on me, assessing me, and it was like I was the only thing in the room. As if they could see all the confusion, all the dread, and all the forbidden feelings that were raging inside me. "Lisa, this is Daniel." Michael set his hand on my arm. His touch possessive, his control palpable. And it was his way of showing me that this was not going to be a choice, that I was just a pawn in his twisted game. "It's nice to finally meet you, Lisa," Daniel said, his voice warm, his smile gentle, and his eyes had something that I could not understand. It was a mix of desire with a deep, dark understanding. "Michael has told me so much about you," he added, and it felt like a promise of what was to come. It was a twisted joke, but it was not funny. "Likewise," I replied, my voice barely audible, and I quickly turned to the kitchen. The place that had become the place where I would run away from the reality of what I was going through. But that did not work, because the reality always followed me. I started to cook, the routine tasks feeling like a slow form of torture. The waiting felt unbearable, and I felt my body tingling, my heart racing, as it was all a mixture of fear and a dark desire. I wanted this to end, but also a part of me wanted more. What was wrong with me? Why was I feeling like this? Why wasn't I stopping it? The dinner was a weird mix of forced smiles and casual conversations, where I felt like I was on a stage. I tried to eat, but the food felt like sand on my mouth with no taste, no flavor. It was all a performance. They were both observing me, and their gazes were making me feel exposed. I just wanted it all to stop. But the performance had to continue. It was my role, I had to do it. But then Michael put down the fork and looked at me. It felt like the start of the end. What he said next left me frozen. "You know what?" Michael said with a cheerful tone that was anything but. His voice almost too casual. And I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew that it was coming, that there was no escape now. I was thinking, after all the food, you two could use a better place to talk. Just, relax and see if you have anything in common. I am really tired and I could go for a nap. I looked at him, my eyes full of fear. And a small part of anger was starting to build up. He just looked at me as if he was so innocent. But I knew he was everything but innocent. Daniel looked at me, his eyes searching mine, waiting for my reaction. And I knew there was no escaping it now. My hand was sweaty, my face was red. My chest was tight, there was nothing that I could do. It would be great, Daniel replied with a gentle smile. His eyes on mine. And I hated them both, I was so lost. If that's what you would like, of course. It was not a question, it was an order. Yeah, it's fine, I said, my voice trembling. But also I felt a thrill, a strange excitement that I hated. And it made me feel worse. But I couldn't stop it. The world was spinning and I was falling, but instead of wanting to grab the edge, I was surrendering to the void. Michael walked to the kitchen and kissed my head. And that's it. Everything was set. I was now on my own. And they were both waiting. I stood, my body stiff. But my heart was pounding in my chest. The feeling was a twisted mixture of fear, excitement, and complete resignation. A feeling of complete surrender, as I knew that the moment I was dreading had finally arrived. Michael patted me one last time before heading up to his room. And then Daniel's smile lingered. Soft yet unreadable, as he leaned in slightly and asked, "Ready?" I wasn't, but somehow I was. What happened next left me unspoken. My heart raced as we moved to the living room. Daniel's hand brushed against mine. A small touch that sent shivers all over my body. A twisted mix of repulsion and a strange curiosity. I sat on the couch, Daniel next to me. His body too close. His presence both threatening yet oddly intriguing. Was like a magnet pulling me into an abyss I was dreading, yet curious to explore. A sudden chill overcame me, followed by a heat, and I felt completely lost. I knew what was happening, yet I didn't know what was truly going to happen. Because a darker part of me pushed all boundaries I tried to erect. So Daniel said, his voice soft, almost too gentle, his eyes fixed on mine, waiting for me to play my part in the twisted play. And I hated him. But a strange part of me also wanted him to wait for me. At least Michael tells me you're a great cook. It felt like a command, a signal to participate. And all my anger started to take over. It was all too much, it was a lie. But I had to do it, and I could see him expecting me to do it. I was a puppet in their game. Well, I do enjoy it, I replied, my voice almost robotic. My eyes focused on my hands. It was an act that was the only thing that I could do. It helps me distract myself from the world. And that line was sincere. But I hated that he smiled. A small, almost gentle curve on his lips. His eyes lingering on my face. We all need that, he said. His voice a low murmur, his thumb tracing circles on my hand. And I hated that I liked that touch. That it made my skin tingle. I needed to end this. What do you do for distraction? He asked, and that felt like a clear invitation to engage. That I had no choice but to play along. To be his puppet. Oh, many things, I said, my eyes focusing on him now. Looking deep into those eyes. Looking for any hidden sign of something. Books mostly, and when I can. I try to walk, I said. It felt too personal, too vulnerable. Which made my skin burn with shame. Sounds peaceful, he said. Leaning in just slightly, I like the gym, cooking. Trying new things, he added. It felt suggestive and threatening. He was talking directly to me. For the first time I saw a glimpse of what was under. What was the surface of that kind smile? His tone was almost playful. And I hated how I liked that playfulness. That flirtation that I was trying to resist. But my body was not. We continued to talk, the conversation flowing like a twisted river. And we shared words, but all the words had a double meaning. As if we both knew what was really going on. And it was like we were playing a role in a play. A twisted, sick play. It felt like a performance. And I was not able to stop it. I was being dragged along. He was making me engage. I felt like I was slowly disappearing. And the only thing I could do is to watch, as the threads that held me together started to be cut. One by one. And I hated them. But it also made my body burn with this unwanted excitement. Why was I doing this? Why was my body not revolting? I asked myself. Twisted sensation that was both painful and strangely pleasurable. But as the minutes passed, I felt a shift, a change in the dynamic. Daniel's gaze lingered a little too long. His body getting closer, his words became more suggestive. And I could feel the tension, the underlying desire slowly building. His hand found mine and his fingers traced my skin. It felt like the air itself was electric, and he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. You know, talking like this, it's quite amazing, he said, his voice low. That made my skin tingle with a mixture of desire and also a twisted form of shame. Maybe, I replied. I did not pull back, I did not say no. I did not revolt, and it was in that moment that I understood that I had started to surrender. Afterward, Daniel leaned closer, his lips now near my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Maybe, he whispered, his fingers now tracing my neck. But maybe sometimes it's better to let go. His words were a temptation, a challenge, and part of me, the dark, forbidden part of me, wanted to give in. And it was scary to admit that to myself at that moment. Just as his lips were about to touch mine, just as my body started to surrender to that darkness, just as I felt that I was about to give in completely, I felt a subtle touch on my hair. And the touch was familiar, too possessive. It was Michael. He was there. His presence a silent reminder that I was never going to be alone in that situation. And he had waited for this. You know, Michael said. His voice a low, almost seductive whisper. His tone was almost mocking. You seemed so tense before. His fingers traced my neck, sending unwanted shivers down my spine. But now, he added. I could feel his smile getting wider as he watched our faces, as his touch slowly moved lower to my shoulders, then to my back. You look relaxed, he concluded. And seeing you like that, well, it warms my heart, as if you have finally understood the truth. His words felt like a twisted compliment, as if he was watching all of this as a form of a distorted love story. And that made me feel even more confused, more powerless. Finally, Daniel's lips touched mine. His kiss a burning invitation. And it all started to become too real. My skin on fire, my senses tingling. And I tried to resist, to stop, to fight back, but there was something else taking over. Something that was both terrifying and exciting. That feeling made my stomach twist. But yet I wanted it. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the moment, accepting the twisted reality that I was now a part of, as my body, without any permission of mine, started to respond. It felt something I have never felt before. I was being taken by the hand, dragged into the darkness that had been set before me. His hands moved on my skin, his touch exploring me with such power that it felt as if all of my insides were on fire, as if I was slowly being melted by this twisted fantasy. I moved, wanting to stop it, wanting it to end, but it was too late. Daniel found his way to me, and that first touch of it was so brutal, so rough, so big, that a tear rolled down my cheek, as if my body was revolting, caught between fear and desire. Ouch almost escaped my lips. As it started, I felt as if I was going to split in two. But he did not stop, and then everything went dark. I was lost in a whirlwind of sensations. I was no longer in control. I was no longer myself. I was a vessel being filled. And the size, the sheer force. It was so overwhelming, I was drowning in it all. Lost in a wide body responded in ways that I had never imagined. All those forbidden feelings taking control. I didn't know what was happening to me. But there was something in that moment that made my body do all the things that I was trying to control. And it was too much to bear. But also it felt strangely exciting. Through the chaotic blur I could see Michael. His eyes fixed on me and they were full of that sick excitement. That twisted fascination as if he was looking at a piece of art. Not on a human being. I felt such a mix of feelings that it made my heart ache. I wanted him but also I hated him. I wanted to scream to destroy and to stop all this. The thought made my chest tighten. And it was in that moment, as I looked at Michael watching me, that I knew that he was completely lost. That his fantasy was controlling him, and I felt pity for him. It made all of this even more twisted. As his desire had turned me into this creature that I was unable to control. But then I gave in to the pleasure. And then all I could recall were fragmented moments. Blurred sensations. A twisted mix of pleasure and pain merging into one terrifying, thrilling experience. I felt myself slipping into a world that no longer felt like my own. A world shaped by someone else's desires. I was a part of it, yet I didn't want to be. Or did I? I couldn't decide. The line between surrender and resistance blurred beyond recognition. But this didn't end here, the story was far from over. Morning crept in, pulling me reluctantly from the haze of the night. The scent of our bodies lingered in the air, a heavy reminder of all that had just happened. And I woke up on the couch disoriented. My body aching in protest. My mind struggling to piece together the fragments of a night that had changed everything. The living room was dimly lit, the early morning light barely peeking through the blinds. And it all felt so distant. Like a bad dream that I could not escape. I looked at my body, I could feel his hands again. The way he had touched me. That twisted mix of pleasure and shame made my stomach turn. My body tremble. Then I found my phone on the coffee table. The screen lit up, displaying a text message from an unknown number. It was from Daniel. "Hey Lisa, it's Daniel. Michael gave me your number. Had some urgent work this morning, so I had to leave early. I enjoyed last night. Hope you did too." The message was so casual, so dispassionate, it sent a shiver down my spine. It was clear that he didn't get it. He hadn't understood what had truly happened. And that message felt like a reminder of what I had been forced to do. Michael had orchestrated this all. He had played me, he was in control. And I felt dirty. My hands trembled, I felt a mix of anger, disgust, and also a small feeling of a strange, unwanted desire that I couldn't comprehend. I needed to get away from all of this. So I got up, my body still heavy, my movements firm. And I walked to the kitchen, with the purpose of putting an end to it all. My mind was set and there was no way to turn back. It was time to erase all the boundaries that they had put on me, and reclaim the control that I had given away. I saw him there, Michael, preparing coffee as if everything was fine. As if he was living in his own world, where his actions had no consequences. "Morning," he said, with a gentle tone that was so out of touch with reality that it made me laugh, a dry, humorless sound that barely touched his ears. He turned towards me, his eyes searching mine. And for the first time they were not full of twisted desires. They were a mix of fear and anticipation. As if he already knew that he was going to be losing. "Morning," I replied, my voice flat, empty of all emotion. And I poured myself a cup of coffee. "Did you sleep well?" I asked. That question was designed to expose the twisted nature of everything. Of what we had become. He took a deep breath and took the coffee cup in his hand. Then a small, almost non-existent smile appeared on his face. "Yeah, I did. I hope you did too. You know, you seemed so tense before." he added, and that confirmed it. He had seen nothing, he had learned nothing. He still lived in his own twisted reality. So I took my cup and walked away. That was that. But little did I know everything was about to change. The house was too quiet again, and I was alone in this mess, surrounded by the ghosts of what had just happened. All my actions from yesterday felt surreal. But they had happened. I was not who I was yesterday or the day before or the day before. And that was it. Everything had changed. As I walked back to my room, I felt like the air had been replaced with something thick. Something heavy that made it hard to breathe. And all that I wanted to do was to look for something that felt real. That was not touched by his twisted desires. That's when my eyes caught an old photo album of us. I grabbed at my fingers, brushing against the old paper, as if trying to touch a past that was now lost. And a new photo fell from inside the pages. It was us back when we had first met. Then as I looked at the old pictures, my heart started to ache, and a tear fell on my cheek as I saw all those memories. All the love, all the hopes that had been lost. A part of me wanted that back. Wanted that twisted reality to go away. I was looking at those pictures of us, so innocent, so happy, so full of love. And it all felt so distant from the twisted mess we were now in. All those distorted feelings, all the darkness was now fighting inside of me. And I was no longer trying to contain them. And as I looked at that familiar smile, that look in his eyes, something changed. The anger and the resentment were still there, but they were accompanied by a twisted feeling of sadness. A desire to make it all right again. To bring that old Michael back. To regain all that we had lost. And that I needed to explore with a purpose. All the strength that I had was finally taking form. And it was giving me direction. A clear path that was not about being free, but about making things normal. I needed to go back, I had to go through him. And I knew that was wrong. So I walked to the office room. My footsteps heavier than before. The anger slightly faded, but it was replaced by a twisted determination to try to fix us. Even with all that had just transpired, I had to give him a chance. A final chance to make it right. And it was for that I went to see him. That twisted and complex human being that I was about to confront. Michael was there as always, immersed in his own world. And his eyes looked at me when I entered, almost startled. I knew I had a choice to make. To follow my anger or to follow the twisted call of a lost love. And I did not choose correctly, but I did choose. We need to talk, I said. My voice softer, almost vulnerable. But the message was still clear. He took his glasses off and he looked at me. A mix of fear, confusion. Also a hint of hope. He still did not get it. What is it? He asked. And it felt like a twisted invitation. I was looking at some old photos of us. I began. My voice softer now, my hand moving to my heart. And all those emotions were so strong that it was difficult to talk. And I tried to see if I could reach him through what I was going to say. And I was remembering all those memories we had. What we were before all of this. Before we changed into something that was not us. I added it was more for me than it was for him. We cannot do this again, Michael. All that darkness, all those games. That has to stop. I just want things to be as they were. I want us to be what we were before all this. Before all of this madness started to consume our hearts. He was silent for a moment, then said, I just wanted us to be happy. I thought this could help. That you would like it too. I thought that Daniel was someone that I trusted. It was all for you. I thought that this could help. That you would understand. But I was so wrong. He stopped for a moment and a tear fell from his eye. "I'm sorry. Let's just never do this again," I said, and I walked out of the office. Then I was free again. I had taken the first step to go back to normal. But normal had been twisted too much. And then I had a duty. I had to break those strings for good. To put an end to that mad game. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling, with a mixture of emotions that were both old and new. With that trembling hand I sent that message. "Daniel, don't contact me again. What happened was wrong and I want it to be done." The words were clear and final. But a part of me knew that they were empty, because something had changed inside of me. At that moment I knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. Yet despite everything I felt an unwanted excitement. I could feel that hidden desire still lingering. And I knew that those ghosts would stay with me for the rest of my life. And they were now part of me. I could only hope to control them and never let them take over. What would you do if this happened to you? Would you be able to go back? I just don't know. Was it the right choice? Let me know what you think.